Hello everybody, Dark Skeleton here, and today we're going to be doing our first card review for Mean Streets of Gadgetzan, which was released earlier today if you are actually watching from the US. So let's just get started with it. 31 cards out of 132 total already announced, which is sweet. First up, Goons the Forgotten King, the new Druid legendary, 10 mana 7/7, gain 10 armor or refresh your mana crystals. Overall, how I feel about this card is that it is pretty weak. If you compare it to something like Yasiraj, where this card can get you basically another card on the back of playing the 10 mana minion, so it's kind of like a 0 mana minion and then play extra stuff from your hand. Yasiraj is a 10/10, I think it's a 10/10, for 10 mana that also gets you a big minion, assuming you're playing a big deck. Now, I guess there's a big advantage to it being mana crystals that you can use on cards from your hand because you're not randomized in what you're getting, and that is kind of a big deal. But is that good enough to make a 10 mana 7/7 that allows you to play other stuff from your hand? Good. I mean, it might be. I know Arcane Golem has been really solid because it's like a 1 or 2 or 0 mana 8/8, but we'll have to see. The gain 10 armor is really good against decks like Freeze Mage, of course. But in most cases, I think you probably go for the refresh your mana crystals. The next card is Lunar Visions, which is 5 mana, draw 2 cards, minions drawn cost 2 less. I'm not totally sure about this card because you do have to specifically draw minions, and how quickly does a Druid really want to play out his entire hand? One thought is maybe it would be okay in something like a combo deck or a token Druid deck, which aren't too different from each other. Because you could get like a 2 mana Violet Teacher, which could be really good for a full board the next turn when you get to cheat out a whole bunch more cards. But 5 mana for 2 cards is kind of slow for card draw. It might be pretty good. It's probably comparable to Nourish in some ways. It kind of depends on what you're going for. Are you trying to play those minions out really cheap, or do you just need more cards and more versatility like Nourish has? So Pilfered Power, gain an empty mana crystal for each friendly minion. Probably one of the more interesting cards in the Druid lineup this set, so it's 3 mana. First thought, of course, comes to mind is Token Druid, or just a board rush Druid. I don't know, maybe you play the Murlocs that summon extra Murlocs or something like that, and if you have 2 or 3 guys on your board and you play this, you can easily get 2 or 3 wild growths for 3 mana. One problem, though, is if you are playing that kind of aggressive deck, what are you actually ramping up to? Because, I mean, you have a bunch of cheap minions. Why are you going to need 6 mana crystals? It's kind of the same problem that Zoo Warlock runs into when it gets into its later stages. It's just, sure, you have an extra card draw, and that is one of the things that makes Zoo really good. But you do eventually run out of steam. And I think as a Druid, you're probably going to run out of steam even quicker unless you play Sir Finley and change your hero power into life tap. Then you could kind of play Druid like a Zoo. It might be okay. I mean, the card in itself theoretically has a lot of power. I just don't see where it fits in yet. But, I mean, lots more cards to come out, so we'll have to see. Lotus Agents. So this is, I believe, one of those multi-class cards where Druid, Rogue, and Shaman can play it. And I thought for these cards there was supposed to be a little symbol. Maybe Hearthstone just doesn't have them yet or something. But it's a 5 mana, 5/3, discover a class card from one of 3 classes. And if you compare that to something like Ethereal Pillager, I think it's really comparable. Ethereal Pillager, Mage only, discover a Mage spell. In some ways, Lotus Agents might be better than that. Sure, you lose 1 damage, but I don't think that was ever too relevant with Ethereal Pillager. But the ability to grab cards from other classes is the ability to potentially break the game sometimes. Now, I don't know exactly what this would fit in, but if you're playing a rogue, I don't know, control rogue, and you pick up a hex, that's crazy. It's going to be really unexpected. Though to rely on specific cards, it's not going to work out too well, just simply because there's so many cards that it's going to be a bit inconsistent. I guess one thing I am saying now is, if you're playing Shaman and you discover a pilfered power, that might be pretty, well, you still have to wait till turn 5 or turn 6, but I mean, Shaman would really benefit from a card like this, just given all the totems. Okay, Mark of the Lotus. 1 mana, give your minions +1/+1. I think this is a super strong card. You can compare it to Power of the Wild, where it's 2 mana, summon a 3/2, or give your minions +1/+1, but for 1 extra mana. And I think the thing with Power of the Wild is, you usually play it in Token Druid, and you almost always use it for the +1/+1. So in most cases, this is just a better Power of the Wild. The exception is really if you don't have a board at all, or if you are playing Fandral Staghelm, which is relevant because Fandral Staghelm is basically played in every Druid deck at the moment. Okay, Hunter cards. Piranha Launcher. This was the first card they showed on the live stream, and I think people have it right when they're like, this is pretty much dust, not very good. 5 mana, 2/4, whenever your hero attacks, summon a 1/1 Piranha. They've tried 2/4 weapons in the past for even less mana than that. Shaman currently have one that's 4 mana, and then when it has its death rattle, the Shaman hero power turns into a 2 damage Fire Blast. I think that is better than this. It's potentially deal 8 damage over a very long time and summon 4 1/1 Piranhas. I don't think that's really too great. And in terms of using the weapon for trading, it's really hard to make a weapon on turn 5 relevant in dealing minion damage. Sure, you might be able to combine this with another card, like Quick Shot, and hit it with the Piranha Launcher, and you take 6 damage because you're trying to hit a mid-range minion. And you get a 1/1 off the back of it. Wow, take 6 damage to half kill a minion, and I just don't see it. Unless there's something that like gives your weapon a lot more attack. You could say like Captain Greenskin, but I don't think so. Okay, and this card over here, Grim Street in format, one of those cross-class cards, I believe. 2 mana, 1/1, discover a Hunter, Paladin, or Warrior card. I don't know how well that would do in Hunter, but I think for like a Control Paladin or a Control Warrior, that's perfectly fine. Also has Brand Bronzebeard synergy. I think it would be pretty weird in Hunter, though, because most Paladin and Warrior cards seem to be more mid-rangey or Control style even. So I don't know if Hunter, where they play more aggressively, are really going to want something like that. Maybe they could be an aggressive Hunter, control-based Hunter deck. That's something I've been wanting for a really long time, but every set just proves that Hunter is best when you just pressure the opponent and deal lots of damage. But yeah, it might be interesting getting Hunter secrets in, I don't know, a Warrior deck or something like that. But probably not super strong, but playable. Okay, Mage cards. Kazakus, there's already a video out about how this card works. They did reveal him on the live stream. So it's 4 mana, 3/3. If your deck has no duplicates, create a custom spell. So how it works is you discover a mana cost, which is either 1, 6, or 10. Then you pick one spell effect, which its power will be based on the mana cost, and then you pick a second spell effect. So the example on the stream, I believe, was 10 mana, deal 6 damage to every minion on the field, and then resurrect 3 minions that died this game. So, in a way, it's a lot like Archthief Rafam, except maybe even more versatile than that, because rather than just discovering a 10-cost spell, you have, I think they said, over 100 possibilities, and you get to play this card a lot sooner, so you know what you're going to make early on. And also worth mentioning, the deal 10 damage randomly Archthief Rafam spell is pretty bad, so there's really only 2 super valuable choices there. I think Kazakus is better than Archthief Rafam. Okay, Manic Soul Caster. Choose a friendly minion, shuffle a copy into your deck. That's pretty solid. I was thinking Freeze Mage or Control Mage or a Fatigue Mage, even anything that would like putting stuff in your deck. But it could also just be pretty solid for like a Tempo Mage. I mean, 3/4 body is still solid, and let's say it's like put an Azure Drake or put a Flame Waker in your deck, put another Flame Waker in your deck. That sounds really good. So overall, just pretty solid, and I think I would experiment with it with something like a Reno Mage to put another Reno in your deck. That sounds good. Yeah, and if you were playing a Reno deck because you've already drawn the card you're duplicating, you'll never run into the issue where you have a duplicate in your deck. Okay, oh, also worth mentioning, I don't know 100% for sure, but I think Kazakus is one of those Kabbalist cards, so you can actually play this in, let's see, Warlock, and what's the other one? Other Magi class? Priest. Yeah, Warlock and Priest as well. Okay, Kabal Courier. Discover a Mage, Priest, or Warlock card, and you can play this in Mage, Priest, or Warlock. This probably is one of the stronger set-based Discover cards, because when you're talking about discovering Mage, Priest, or Warlock cards, you're probably talking about really heavy control cards, nice removal, Flame Strikes, Twisting Nethers, Entombs, Shadow Word Deaths, could also be like Archmage Antonidas, or Jiraxis even. That would be interesting. Jiraxis and Mage or something. Hidden behind an ice block. That would be pretty OP, actually. But yeah, there's a lot of good cards, I think, in Mage, Priest, or Warlock that synergize well with each other, because Mage, Priest, or Warlock usually have some kind of control theme going on. You obviously wouldn't play this in Zoo. You obviously... well, you probably wouldn't play it in a Tempo Mage, but if you're playing Control Mage, Control Priest, or just Priest in general, or a Reno Lock, I think this is a really good card to have. At the very least, you could think of it as like a 2/2 draw card for 3 mana, but it's a little better than that, I think, because Discover allows you to really pick what you want, and those are always going to be class cards. Okay, Paladin. Wicker Flame Burn Bristle, 3 mana, 2/2, Divine Shield Taunt. Damage dealt by this minion also heals your hero. How I initially felt about this card is it's kind of like a questionably better or worse Silent Knight. And Silent Knight, I think, has seen a little bit of play in very rare circumstances. I think it was actually Trump who tried Silent Knight and constructed. I could be wrong about that. I mean, Silent Knight is a good arena card. It's Stealth Divine Shield rather than Divine Shield Taunt, and it doesn't have that bonus effect, same mana cost. I think that the damage dealt by this minion also heals your hero is pretty irrelevant, honestly. I mean, what are you going to do? Put it in a control deck so you can have extra healing when you already have Ragnaros, Light Lord? And then it's like, woo, you put a 2/2 Annoyatron in front of your opponents. I don't buy that. But in a aggro versus aggro matchup, maybe it's a lot better. Because if you look at these other cards that we're about to talk about, seems like Aggro Paladin might be a thing, and if you buff this card up, which I think is where this card gets good, like your Blessing of Kingston, or you attack and then you Seal of Champions, it becomes a lot better. So like an aggro card that keeps you alive versus Face Hunter, I mean, that might be pretty good. It's not bad with buff cards. I don't think it fits into most current Paladin decks, but if you're playing aggro or maybe even Secrets Paladin, that could be solid. Not my favorite card at all, though. It might be okay, I just don't like it. Okay, Small Time Recruits, 3 mana, draw 3 1-cost minions from your deck. Obviously, this is targeted at aggro paladins. Would you play this and Divine Favor in the exact same deck? Hard to say. It's also hard to say which is technically better. But 3 mana, draw 3 is pretty good. Is it nearly as good when you're talking about 1-cost minions? Kind of hard to say. Probably would see play if you were playing one of those very aggressive Paladin decks, which is fine. I don't mind that at all. For instance, you could combine it with Mean Street Marshal, which is over here, 1 mana, 1/2, Death Rattle. If this minion has 2 or more attack, draw a card. Obviously, you play this with buff. There's lots of Paladin buffs. You can Blessing of Might it. You can Divine Spirit. No, not Divine Spirit. Divine something. +1 attack, +2 health it. You could Blessing of Champions it. You could Blessing of Kings it. You could Silver Moon Portal it. And if you actually check Hearthstone right now, there was a aggro paladin that uses the Genie of Zephyrs that was going around, and I think someone was having some pretty good success with that kind of thing. So, a buff paladin with lots of aggressive one-cost minions seems like something that can be pretty viable coming out, which is cool. Also remember this, I mean, if you are playing that kind of card, it's like a 1 mana minion that draws a card, and that's very powerful. Just pointing that out. Grimy Street Informant. Well, already covered this. Yeah, once again, though, I think probably better in Paladin and Warrior than Hunter. And Getaway Kodo. This might be one of the most crazy cards in the Paladin set coming out, because it's a 1 mana secret that doesn't suck. Whenever a friendly minion dies, return it to your hand. I don't think you play this in Aggro Paladins. You probably don't play it in Secret Paladin. But what if you're playing, like, a Control Paladin, where you play Ragnaros Lightlord, or Tyrian Forging, or Sylvanas Windrunner? Like, it'll be really obvious, if it becomes a meta card, that when the control deck plays a secret, it's Getaway Kodo. But what are they going to do about it? Completely ignore your Ragnaros, completely ignore your Tyrian, ignoring the fact it has taunt and they have to go through that? It might just be that it doesn't matter that they know what the secret is, because they're forced to deal with your board in some way. Though, that might also be an overly greedy line of play, but, yeah, returning one of those big drops to your hand so you can play it again the next turn just seems a very grindy way to play Hearthstone. And, probably pretty good, I think. Okay, Kazakus, yep, also a Priest card, also a Warlock card. I think that's going to be a super fun card. Everybody's going to want to play that. But more importantly, the new Priest cards, overall, super sick. Getting started, Dragonfire Potion. Deal 5 damage to all minions except dragons. So priests have been saying like, oh, we lost Light Bomb. That's the worst thing ever. The class sucks now. And that was pretty much true. But Dragonfire Potion, I think, is a really good answer to that. So 5 damage to every minion on the board except your dragon minions. That is a lot of damage. On turn 6, probably going to kill just about anything. But in one way, it's a little better than Light Bomb, and that's if you're playing Dragon Priest. It doesn't destroy your board. You could easily play this in a non-Dragon Priest deck, though. I don't know, Shadow Priest or something like that, where you don't have any minions you care about anyway, and you just need a bigger board clear. 6 mana, fry the board is fine. It's only weaker than Light Bomb if you're up against, like, I don't know, a Druid that has 2 Arcane Golems at the same time. But hopefully you saved your Shadowwood Deaths for that kind of thing. So, yeah, really sick card. Definitely a good reason to play Dragon Priest. Speaking of Dragon Priest, Dragonade Operative. 5 mana, 5/6. If you're holding a dragon, discover a card in your opponent's deck. So a 5 mana, 5/6 is already pretty solid, but a 5 mana, 5/6 that discovers a card is really, 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 really good. And in those, if you're playing like a control matchup, that discover an opponent's card is going to mean, like, steal the Grom, or grab a Sylvanas Windrunner, or, I don't know, against a Druid, maybe, like, an Arcane Golem against a Rogue. Probably less good, but you could still grab, like, an Azure Drake. Very, 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 very powerful card right here. And those 2 cards alone might just make Dragon Priest really good this set. And that's cool to see, because I like Dragon Priest. Okay, Pint-Sized Potion, another really strong card for Priest. Give all enemy minions -3 attack this turn only, so there's multiple synergies for this card. The most obvious one is Cabal Shadow Priest, so 7 mana and you can steal a 5 attack minion, while developing a 4/5 in addition to that. That's pretty good. You could even play 2 of these, and on turn 8 you could steal an 8-cost minion. You could steal a Ragnaros, which is pretty crazy. Another example for what you can use this card for is Shadowwood Horror, which destroys all minions 2 attack or less. So if you play this with Shadow Word Horror effectively becomes 5 mana, 2 cards, destroy all enemy minions that have 5 attack or less. Now that's a really solid AoE. Could put that in your Dragonfire Potion deck, and I mean, if you combine that with Excavated Evil and some of the other stuff that priests do currently have, that's just a ton of AoE to keep the board clear at all times. Now, worth mentioning in addition to that is not only can you play those priest cards, but you can also the cards that swap attack and health around. Crazed Alchemist, and they also have a 4 mana Crazed Alchemist now. So you could use this with Crazed Alchemist as 3 mana, destroy any minion that has 3 attack or less, and develop a 2/2. And you could play 2 Crazed Alchemists to kill 2 minions, because when you, and I'm assuming I have this right, but when you flip a minion that has 0 attack with its health, it has 0 health, so it dies. So you could play a Shadow Word Horror, Crazed Alchemist, Pint-Sized Potion, Priest deck. That sounds pretty interesting to me. Probably the kind of deck that's a little bit more interesting than the Dragon deck. Yeah, we know the Dragon deck's going to be good, but this kind of tricky playstyle where you have to use your pint-sized potions with your other cards to get interesting effects could be interesting. Kabal Talon Priest. Okay, another really solid priest card. So the problem with, what was it called? Like, Dark Cultist, I think it was called. From the Naxxramas set, 3 mana, 3/4 priest death rattle minion, giver minion, plus 3 health, is that to get a death rattle to trigger and have another minion on your side of the board is really tough. It's the same reason that that 4/4 that gives a minion +3/+3 on death rattle is terrible. But as a battle cry, that's really easy to pull off. You could just turn to, I don't know, play the 2/4 taunt that Dragon Priests have, and then you buff it up to 7 attack, and then every aggro deck ever can not get through that, and you basically win the aggro matchup. You could also play it on a big minion, a little bit bigger minion, like, let's say, a Priest of the Feast, make it a 9 health minion, and Priest of the Feast, you really can't completely ignore that, so the priest can just keep casting spells, healing himself up, if they do choose to ignore it, and if they don't choose to ignore it, they have to go through a 9 health minion. So yeah, Kabal Talon Priest, wouldn't be surprised if that makes it into the majority of priest decks going forward, because Battlecry give a minion +3 health is pretty good. I mean, it's not insanely good, because the Temple Enforcer, which is a 6 mana minion, 6 mana, 6/6, give a friendly minion +3 health as a Battlecry, isn't played. It's, I would say, borderline playable, but it's not played. But I think this is a better stat line, and it's a lot more reasonable to play it for the Battlecry because it has a lower mana cost. A 6 mana minion that has that effect is kind of tricky to play. Okay, Potion of Madness. Gain control of an enemy minion with 2 or less attack until the end of the turn. So it's very much like a cheap Shadow Word Madness, I think that's what it's called. And probably has some good synergy with Pint-Sized Potion. I don't know exactly what you would be trying to target with this, because if you're going to steal a minion for 1 turn, you do want it to die, but it could be like Pint-Sized Potion, Potion of Madness, steal their Sylvanas, use their Sylvanas to hit something, and steal their other big minion. That seems pretty good to me, but that does require a 2-card setup, but a 2-card setup to steal a Sylvanas and then steal their other big minion sounds really good. Situationally really good. That's the problem with these potion cards, they're situationally really good. Okay, Rogue. Lotus Assassin, 5 mana, 5/5. Stealth, whenever this minion kills an enemy, gains stealth. I think people saw this and they were underestimating it. So it's basically a better Stranglethorn Tiger because it's going to have permanent stealth effectively. So you trade, you kill a minion, and maybe this survives as like a 5/2. Normally your opponent would want to kill that because the 5 damage is a lot to leave on the board for trading, and 2 health minion isn't too hard to kill. I mean, you don't even have to use the 2nd attack for trading. You can also use it to hit face, but a 5 mana minion that's probably going to survive because your opponent would have to AoE in order to answer it I think that's pretty good, especially if you're playing more control-y or board-centric. Other people are going to have a pain dealing with this. Because one thing to keep in mind is that if you use this, you clear your opponent's minion. They want to develop a minion, but they can't because you have like a 5-1 or a 5-2 threatening the board. So if they play another minion, you just get a sick trade and you 2-for-1 with this guy. And otherwise, they have to like lightning storm one minion on your board, and that's also a win for you. So yeah, it's actually a really good card, I think. Lotus Agents. Okay, so this is the Discover for Druids, Rogue, and Shaman. 5 mana, 5/3. Oh yeah, I think we actually did cover this card. Overall, I think this is probably the second best one of the Discovers. I mean the multi-class Discovers, behind the Mage, Shaman, Priest one. Just because I think Rogue cards kind of are weird, and Shaman and Druid, and maybe Druid's kind of weird with the other classes too. So I don't know. We'll have to see in practice, but yeah, a 5/3. Remember, Ethereal Pillager. Yeah, that's the card, is pretty good, so maybe this will be good too. Okay, and then Shaman cards, pretty much unannounced so far, so we'll have to see about that going forward. Warlock, no cards yet, but there's one more for Warrior, which is 1 mana Discover a Taunt minion. The most interesting thing about this card is that it reveals, hey, Blizzard wants to make this a Taunt Warrior set. So obviously you could get that 7 attack, 7 health. No, you can't. Because the one that gives the 1/1 Scarabs, it's not a taunt itself. So I don't actually know which taunt you're trying to go for here. I assume you can't get Tyrion off of it, but maybe you can. Maybe you can just grab the taunts off other classes. Not 100% sure how that works. Maybe they'll make a new Warrior Legendary that's a taunt minion as well, but bolster decks might be a real thing here if they're trying to push these kind of taunt minions in the new set. I think a bolster actually being viable would be pretty cool this set. So let's move on to the neutral minions. Finja the Flying Star, 5 mana, 2/4 Murlocs. It also has stealth. Whenever this attacks and kills a minion, summon 2 Murlocs from your decks. So some people were comparing it to, or pointing out that it's pretty good in buff Paladin. I kind of agree there. Because the stats are really weak on turn 5, but it's probably not going to die because it has stealth. So you want to follow this up with a Blessing of King or a Blessing of Kings or something like that. Hit a minion, summon 2 Murlocs from your deck, get nice value out of that. And then it's still probably something like a 6/4 or 6/5 after it hits the minion, and the opponent has to remove it for sure because it's such a huge threat to get 2 more Murlocs. Yeah, might play in something like Druid if crazy Murloc token Druid was a thing. I mean, summoning 2 Murlocs from your deck does flood the board. That's worth mentioning. Overall, probably pretty decent in Murloc-based decks. It would be interesting to know if it would be played in an Anything Can Happen deck, because you can get those Murlocs out on the field a lot sooner. And it's not like you really need to play the War Leader or the Bluegill at the right time in combination with each other, although that's a pretty strong play. You just need them to die. So basically cycling quicker and quicker towards the Anything Can Happen might be okay. And then having 1 more minion on the back of your Anything, not necessarily bad. I mean, it might mess things up a little bit on the second Anything, but yeah, it's an option worth considering there, I think. So Patches the Pirate, 1 mana, 1/1, charge after you play a pirate, summon this minion from your deck. I think this is actually pretty good. It's not good when you draw it into your opening hand, but obviously if you get it, you mulligan it. And then on turn 1, you're going to play a pirate, it's going to get summoned, so it's basically like a 0 mana 1/1 that you don't even have to draw and it just hits the field. You could also read it like, your first pirate summoned this game has a battle cry, summon a 1/1 charger. I think that's pretty good, because 80-85% of the time, you're probably not going to have this in your opening hand. You mulligan a couple cards, and you always toss Patches back to your deck. It might actually be higher than 80-85%, maybe like 90% of the games. It's just going to get summoned as a free battle cry, and you don't care about card efficiency in pirate decks because obviously they're aggro. So yeah, just a completely free 1/1 charger that comes out of nowhere. That's good. Okay, Wind Up Burglebot. 6 mana, 5/5 mech. Whenever this attacks a minion and survives, draw a card. I want this card to be good, but overall I do think it's probably on the weaker side. The stats aren't good, and if your opponent sees this, he's probably just going to kill it with, like, I don't know, a Shadow Strike or something like that. There's a good chance that the minions he has on his board can already trade into this. You could argue that for aggro decks it would be like a must remove, but I don't even think that's the case. Drawing one card isn't that big of a deal, and aggro decks are just going to be like, so you drew an extra card. Whatever, you played a bad minion, and I'm just going to take advantage of that to destroy you. So, probably a weak card overall. Would be interesting to see if people want to try to discover it with the Gorilla Bot or something. But yeah, mechs haven't been a thing ever since GVG got removed. Or transitioned into Wild. Maybe in Wild mode it would be not horrible. Okay, Fel Orc Soul Fiend, 3 mana. At the start of your turn, deal 2 damage to this minion. So initially you play it as a 3/7, and your opponent pretty much cannot deal with it because it has 7 health. Then on your turn it becomes a 3/5, which is really good for 3 mana. And every turn after your first attack turn, it becomes probably a little bit worse. So people have been saying it's pretty good with Priest because you can utilize your hero power, and that's somewhat true. If you need something to stick around on the board for at least one turn, it's probably not bad because no one's going to deal 7 damage to it just to remove it, especially because it eventually kills itself. So yeah, going back to Priest, comparable to Injured Blademaster, probably not as good. Can be played with Resurrect, can be played with Onyx Bishop. Other classes, maybe Warrior would use it somehow, like in combination with their Frothing Berserker, because they benefit when minions deal damage to themselves. Could also be played with Battle Rage. I mean, not bad as a Battle Rage minion, I think. So overall, it has some uses. We'll have to see, though. I mean, that downside is pretty significant, and we'll have to see if it's too much or if it's just right. Okay, so Big Time Ratcheteer, 6 mana, 1/1, summon a 6/6 Ogre. I looked at this and I was like, okay, so it's like slightly better than a Boulder Fist Ogre, but actually, given that it's a battle cry, it's really good with Brand Bronzebeard. So you could play this as a 9 mana, summon 2 6/6 Ogres, a 1/1 Goblin, and a 2/4 Brand Bronzebeard. Getting an extra 6/6 Ogre on the battle based off of having a Brand Bronzebeard is insane. That might actually be one of the strongest battle cries in the game right now, I'm thinking. I mean, obviously there's stuff like Deathwing, but that doesn't benefit in conjunction with Brand Bronzebeard, but this does. I guess you could say one of the strongest Brand Bronzebeard synergy effects. I wouldn't really count Archthief for farm in that, because the idea of you getting a Brand Bronzebeard, making it survive, and then playing Archthief for farm in the same deck, that's kind of dreaming. Oh, and then it's like, ooh, you get 2 10-cost Uber spells. But no, I think that combo, Brand Bronzebeard plus this, is going to be pretty good, at least until League of Explorers cycles out. Okay, Second Rate Bruiser, 5 mana Taunt, costs 2 less if your opponent has at least 3 minions. So this is going to be pretty okay if your opponent's kind of trying to rush you down, like those Paladin, Aggro Paladin decks that just play a bunch of 1-drops, or Zoo decks, or anything like that. Then it becomes a 3 mana 4/5, which is nice. As a 5 mana 4/5, it's not super terrible because the opponents who are going to not have 3 minions are going to be usually control or mid-range decks. And in those cases, you don't necessarily always have to play super on curve with your tempo. A 5 mana 4/5 taunt, just straight up, isn't terrible. Probably slightly less good than like Ascension Shieldmaster, but I think for what this deck is trying to fight against, which is getting rushed down, it can be pretty good. It'll be a pretty solid draw off of the I Know a Guy, the warrior card that discovers a taunt minion. I don't know if you'll put it in your deck, and it's still pretty okay in Arena too. I mean, Yeti stats are still pretty solid. Okay, Kooky Chemist, kind of like the Crazed Alchemist. 4 mana, 4/4, swap the attack and health of a minion. I don't know if you would ever want to play both Crazed Alchemist and Kooky Chemist, or which you would actually play. Would you play the one with more stats and more mana cost, or would you play the Crazed Alchemist for the speed? Don't know, really depends. Also will be interesting to see if they have any extra synergy cards here where just swapping the stats of your cards has some extra benefit. I mean, obviously you can use this to kill 0 attack minions really well, or minions that you make 0 attack, but we'll have to see. Like, will Chemist Priest be a thing? It's a very interesting concept to play around with, anyway. Okay, Friendly Bartender, 2 mana, 2/3 at the end of your turn, restore 1 health to your hero. Pretty tame overall. I would say in Arena it's above average card, just having that effect. You could also play it in some kind of priest deck where it's like a heal priest, because there's cards like Holy Champion still, which get +2 attack for every heal effect that goes off. So you could kind of see this as like a 2/3 for 2 mana that buffs your Holy Champion +2 attack, and also keeps you alive as a priest if your opponent's just trying to rush you down. Overall, probably not one you put into too many constructed decks, but it's not terrible, it's definitely playable. Okay, and Mistress of Mixtures over here. I was actually kind of arguing about this with one of my friends, whether this was better than Zombie Chow or not. So it's 1 mana 2/2 as opposed to a 2/3, where Death Rattle restores 4 health to both players. So Zombie Chow is restore 5 health to your opponent, and that's a 2/3 for 1 mana. Obviously the cards are kind of comparable. My argument is that what Mistress of Mixtures usually dies to, Zombie Chow also usually dies to. War Axe, Wrath, Quick Shot, Eagle Horn Bow, let's see, what else? Like a Lightning Bolt. Cards like that. Obviously there are some exceptions, like a Living Roots will kill this, but won't kill a Zombie Chow. So there's a little bit of a downside in that it has 1 less health, but I don't think a 2/2 is too far away from a 2/3, and the fact that this heals you as well makes it a lot more useful later on in the game. You could be going up against like a Freeze Mage, or your opponent could have just dealt damage to you over the course of the game, and you want to make sure that you're outside of any kind of crazy combo range, or you just want to keep yourself alive, and that's all you care about because you're playing a control deck. I think when you play Mistress of Mixtures on turn 4 or 5, in that regard, it's slightly better than the Zombie Chow. Maybe that's wrong, but I think at least they're pretty comparable, pretty close. So for a control-based deck, this is a really good 1-drop. Really good example would be like a Reno Rogue, because outside of the Reno Jackson, there's not too many good healing cards for non-healing classes, and this does give them another option. Okay, so I think that's it for the card review for today. I've been Dark Skeleton. Hope you guys are excited about this new set, which is basically like ninjas versus film noir versus pirate. I don't know. But it's a lot sweeter than the Gadgetzan I had in mind, which was just goblins in a desert. I like this theme a lot more. So anyway, I've been Dark Skeleton. Keep an eye on my channel if you want to see more card reviews as they come out, and I'll see you guys in my future videos.